Alright, let's dive into English 3, Section 5 on Shakespeare. Now, without reading an entire Shakespeare play, it might be a little hard to understand Shakespeare, but we're going to do our best. Okay? Shakespeare's life. Let's see here. There's no more famous playwright than William Shakespeare. While the facts of his life are uncertain, scholars and historians have used sources such as his writing, his church records, historical references, and other legal documents to piece together a likely outline of how he lived. Shakespeare lived during the Elizabethan period in England, a time of literary and artistic abundance. It's called the Elizabethan period because it was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, coinciding with England's emergence as a world leader in naval and commercial pursuits. London, where Shakespeare spent his professional life, was the heart of England at this time. Still is, really. Artists working in London were among the leading creative minds of the time. Shakespeare's birth date and death date aren't certain, but his death date is listed as April 23rd, 1616, and he was buried on April 26th, 1616. Okay, so, I didn't read the whole thing because I'm not sure it's entirely necessary, and it might just put you to sleep. If you want to take some notes there, feel free. Oh, here's a cool one. His wife was named Anne Hathaway, like the actress today. Although historians and scholars disagree about the authorship of some of his works, they generally credit him with 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and 2 epic narrative poems. An epic narrative poem is a poem that tells a story, right? Narrative means tells a story. An epic means it has these larger-than-life characters and a great mythic story to tell. In his time, Shakespeare was the most popular playwright in London, so this isn't one of those times where the person only gets famous after they die. Shakespeare was famous while he was alive, and his fame has really only grown. We now call him the Bard. If you say the Bard, it means Shakespeare. Shakespeare's plays fall in 4 general periods. Definitely write this down, what the 4 periods are. This will come up. So, pre-1594, Shakespeare was an emerging playwright who structured his plays using the roots of Roman and medieval dramas. His works were generally optimistic and expressed the exuberance of youthful love and imagination. Pieces written during the second period revealed his growth. With increased insight into human nature, Shakespeare also began weaving together comedy and tragedy, which they like to call tragicomedy. T-R-A-G-I, comedy, tragicomedy, which would eventually become a hallmark of his style. He wrote Much Ado About Nothing during this period. I think that's Much Ado About Nothing is the play that we focus on in this section, so that's why they mentioned that one. The third period is where he wrote most of his tragedies, inspired by personal problems as well as Greek tales such as Antigone and Oedipus Rex. These tragedies are some of his most legendary works, showcasing his literary genius and ability to depict the drama of human consciousness and emotion. In 1601, his father passed away, and his friend, the Earl of Essex, was executed by Queen Elizabeth I. Both events seem to teach him even more about personal tragedy and disappointment. As a result, his writings during this time are often called problem plays, characterized more by complexity than comedy. With shifting tones of violence and darkness, his work of these periods created something of a hybrid, a tragic comedy that blended drama with more straightforward humor. During the fourth and final period, he wrote 3 comedies and a history. This time in his career was marked by a certain calm strength and a sweetness that wasn't apparent in his previous plays. Some say this ability to reflect on events with kindness may have resulted from the death of his mother, whose love was a strong factor in his life. Shakespeare's works from this period may represent a shift in his overall maturity as a person and as a writer, a change in his artistic focus, the Elizabethan era, or perhaps both. Often including more serious themes and using elaborate symbolism, these plays aren't Shakespeare's most well-known. So he was an influencer of the times just as the times influenced him. And there was a plague outbreak in London in 1592, and Shakespeare had a choice to either tour outside of London or start writing poetry. And he decided to start writing poetry because he considered poetry to be superior to plays. So he wrote an epic poem called Venus and Adonis, which became the most widely printed work of his career. He also began to experiment with the structure and style of the sonnet. This is a 14-line poem, originated in Italy, but eventually took on a distinctively English approach, becoming the most popular form of poetry of Shakespeare's era and region. Real quick, Shakespeare sonnet 18. I don't like talking about it in the abstract without showing you what a sonnet is. So, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day is easily the most famous. And this is what it looks like. See? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of what fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Which is, shall I compare you to a day in summer? No, I can't, because you are actually more pretty and more temperate. In May, rough winds shake the flowers, and summer is short. Summer ends too quickly. The eye of heaven is the sun. Sometimes too hot the sun shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines. Everything beautiful eventually fades from beauty, by chance, or nature's changing course untrimmed, by time, by the passage of time. But your eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair that you ost. Right here means ownest, like what you own. You will not lose possession of the beauty that you own. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. You will never look like you're dying, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. Because people will write about your beauty. You're so beautiful, people like me are going to write about your beauty. And as long as men can breathe and eyes can see, so long lives these lines, and these lines give life to thee. That's what they're talking about when they say sonnets. It's 14 lines. See, there's these 4 here, and then 4 more there. Whoops. 4 more there. That's 8. And 4 more makes 12. And then a rhyming couplet at the end. Couplet, just 2 lines together. A couple of lines. Rhyming couplet. Back here. Okay. Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets during his lifetime. The majority of them are addressed to a young man with whom the poet had an intense romantic relationship. The next group, sonnets 127 to 152, feature the poet's relationship with a dark lady who is both promiscuous and scheming. And the final 2 are dedicated to Cupid. Compilations of, the Cupid, bringer of love, a little cherub who shoots arrows. Compilations of Shakespeare's sonnets still grace the shelves of poetry lovers and literature students today. Shakespeare's works are considered among the best ever written. They have been translated into every major living language, and his plays are continually performed around the world. Okay, let me explain to you what iambic pentameter is. It's based on two words, iamb and pent. And iamb is, right, see this, just one word, iamb, is a 2-syllable phrase. Shall I is an iamb. Compare is an iamb. And it's specifically a 2-syllable phrase where the emphasis is on the second syllable. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And there are 5 of those phrases in a line. Pent means 5, right? Come on. pent means 5. So there's shall I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of those in each line. So 5 iambs means it's iambic pentameter. Pentameter. Shakespeare used different patterns of language throughout his works and employed various methods to produce his colorful dramas. Verse is a poetic means of expression that involves separate lines of specific length, usually determined by syllables. Iambic pentameter is a rhyme scheme in which each line of the poem consists of 10 syllables. The syllables are divided into 5 pairs, and each pair is called an iamb. An iamb is made up of an unstressed syllable and then a stressed syllable, such as the word goodbye. So you put the emphasis on by, goodbye. There's a famous example from Sonnet 18. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Shakespeare wrote all but one of his sonnets in iambic pentameter, which, by the way, I've been writing for, 20 years, and I still can't write an iambic pentameter. It's very hard. His plays also are written mostly in unrhymed iambic pentameter, which is called blank verse. Blank verse, there you go, write that down. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. Unrhymed iambic pentameter is called blank verse. Many of his plays also use simple prose, which is the everyday language of conversations, essays, letters, and so on, with no pattern of rhythmic accents. All this right here is prose. Anything that's just written how somebody talks, that's prose. You should write that down too. Oh, come on. There we go. Shakespeare used prose in his plays whenever verse would seem strange. For example, serious letters, proclamations, and passionate speeches are typically in prose. It's also often used for mocking commentary. Rhyming verse is used in Shakespeare's plays for songs, choral effects, and lyrical passages. Whenever the play features a play within a play, which does happen several times, rhyming verse is used to distinguish the fictional performances from the real ones. Meaning, in the main play, everything isn't rhymed, but in the play within a play, everybody speaks in rhyme. Finally, it's also used for dramatic appearances of the supernatural, like the witches in Macbeth, except for ghosts. Ghosts don't talk in rhyme. Blank verse is the primary language of Shakespeare's plays. It suggests a higher artistic effect than prose, but a more realistic pattern of speech than rhyming verse. Often a section of blank verse may be ended with capping couplets, a final 2 lines of rhyming text that close a scene or speech. It's been noted that often, but not always, Shakespeare uses blank verse versus prose to distinguish classes. Lower class characters speak in prose, while higher class aristocracy and royalty will speak in blank verse. This is likely because blank verse, while similar to English-speaking conventions, raises the dialogue above ordinary speech to a more artistic form. So, like, this paragraph would be spoken by a lower class person, but these lines here would be spoken by a high class person. Okay, I hope that all made sense, and I will meet you at 5.2.